Case studies in eclectic astrology, planets in nakshatras, Annabelle, Jupiter in third house, Mrigashira. Jupiter placed in Annabelle's third house links her emotional wisdom, knowledge, and urge for expansion to communication, skill building, and intellectual pursuits. As the lord of her ninth house of higher wisdom and 12th house of spiritual surrender, Jupiter here suggests that her emotional and intellectual growth is tied to how courageously and playfully she expresses herself, balancing between the needs of practical curiosity and the soul's deeper thirst for truth. Jupiter in Mrigashira Nakshatra adds a restless, exploring quality to her emotional nature. The desire to seek out new ideas, conversations, and experiences without becoming trapped in one rigid framework. Emotionally, Annabelle is a natural wanderer, happiest when she is allowed the space to explore, question, and reimagine her beliefs. There is an innate tenderness and emotional flexibility here, as Mrigashira's energy favors gentle exploration over aggressive conquest. Drawing from the planets in nakshatra insights, Jupiter in Mrigashira indicates that Annabelle's emotional and intellectual wisdom is tied to her ability to remain adaptable, curious, and patient while on the search for meaning. There is a karmic memory of past life involvement with teaching, knowledge sharing, and emotionally guiding others through lighter, less authoritative methods, making her an emotionally accessible communicator, teacher, or guide. Her emotional journey will likely involve moving through different communication mediums, philosophies, or teaching models, gradually gathering pieces of wisdom that eventually crystallize into a broader emotional and spiritual purpose. However, emotional challenges arise if she falls into endless seeking without ever anchoring, an emotional impatience that may leave her feeling dissatisfied if her journeys remain too superficial. Lifestyle tendencies suggested by this placement include a love for studying various subjects, especially arts, mythology, travel literature, or spiritual philosophies, emotional rejuvenation through frequent short travels, and forming bonds with emotionally curious, lighthearted individuals. Her emotional networks, siblings, peers, neighbors, may serve as crucial companions in her search for deeper knowledge and emotional security. Jupiter in Mrigashira also grants a unique emotional gift, the ability to emotionally adapt across different belief systems and cultures, making her a bridge between various emotional and intellectual traditions. Yet, her emotional growth demands that she eventually commit to a path, not by rigidly fixing herself, but by consciously choosing the emotional and spiritual journeys that bring lasting nourishment to her curious heart. Ultimately, Jupiter in Mrigashira blesses Annabelle with a lifelong emotional adventure to seek, learn, adapt, and eventually build a garden of emotional wisdom where curiosity matures into fulfillment, where gentle questioning leads to inner security, and where exploration becomes a sacred emotional pilgrimage toward truth. Mars in third house, Punarvas. Mars placed in Annabelle's third house energizes her communication style, courage, everyday actions, and relationships with siblings and peers. As the lord of her first house of self-identity and eighth house of deep psychological transformation, Mars here indicates that her personal vitality, emotional courage, and resilience are channeled into how she communicates, learns, and takes initiative in her immediate environment. Her emotional strength is deeply tied to her ability to express herself and recover from emotional setbacks through mental and communicative action. Mars in Punarvasu Nakshatra softens the typically forceful Martian energy, blending it with emotional optimism, faith, and a natural instinct to emotionally return to center after conflicts or crises. Punarvasu's symbolism of the returning bow signifies an emotional pattern of facing emotional and communicative disruptions, yet always seeking to restore balance, peace, and clarity after emotional storms. There is a resilient spirit here, an emotional drive that pushes her to rebuild, reframe, and try again after setbacks. Drawing from the planets in nakshatra insights, Mars in Punarvasu gifts Annabelle with an emotional ability to act with grace after emotional battles, to assert herself not by domination, but by nurturing new beginnings after difficulties. Her emotional courage is tested in scenarios where she must return to relationships or projects with renewed emotional spirit after periods of disruption, doubt, or emotional conflict. There is also a subtle emotional longing for purity and emotional truth in how she communicates and takes action. Her drive is fueled not just by competition, but by a deeper urge to emotionally restore what has been broken, heal what has been wounded, and guide herself and others toward emotional renewal. Emotional instincts tied to Mars here encourage her to be a bridge builder, someone who can courageously reinitiate dialogue, reopen emotional connections, and courageously express forgiveness when necessary. Lifestyle tendencies suggest that Annabelle emotionally rejuvenates when engaged in pursuits involving writing, public speaking, teaching, emotional counseling, or conflict resolution. She finds emotional vitality when she is allowed to act as a restorer, fixing, mending, recommunicating, rather than merely competing or attacking. Emotional growth is accelerated when she acts from a place of higher moral or spiritual purpose, rather than raw personal ambition. Emotional challenges tied to Mars in Punarvasu include occasional emotional over-optimism, believing that conflicts can always be mended when some may require clearer emotional boundaries instead. Emotional maturity will deepen as she learns when to restore and when to release, balancing her courageous emotional drive with discernment and self-respect. Ultimately, Mars in Punarvasu blesses Annabelle with emotional bravery tempered by hope, the courage to keep communicating through emotional storms, and the deep inner wisdom that every emotional fracture can lead to a stronger, more enlightened reconnection when approached with sincerity and higher emotional purpose. Saturn in fifth house, Maga. Saturn placed in Annabelle's fifth house brings emotional maturity, responsibility, and a structured approach to her creativity, romance, self-expression, and interactions with children or younger souls. As the lord of her 10th house of career and authority and 11th house of gains and social networks, Saturn here ties her emotional satisfaction with her ability to patiently build her creative and emotional life, channeling her love, artistic impulses, and romantic hopes through sustained effort and long-term dedication. Saturn in Maga Nakshatra weaves a deep emotional pride, loyalty to tradition, and an instinctive connection to lineage and heritage into her creative and emotional pursuits. Maga's symbolism of the royal throne grants her an emotional gravitas, a sense that her creative output, romantic relationships, or contributions to children must uphold dignity, honor, and a connection to something greater and more enduring than herself. Her emotional fulfillment comes from building legacies, not fleeting amusements. Drawing from the planets-in-Nakshatra insights, Saturn in Maga indicates that Annabelle carries an emotional inheritance of past life leadership roles, where honor, tradition, and responsibility were paramount. Emotionally, she may feel a heavy sense of duty toward preserving creative traditions, family reputation, or even nurturing younger individuals to carry forward emotionally noble or spiritual values. In love and romance, this placement brings seriousness, loyalty, and emotional caution. Emotional bonds are not entered lightly. She seeks partners who can match her emotional expectations for respect, stability, and shared pride in building something lasting. Emotionally frivolous relationships may feel hollow or even threatening to her deeper emotional yearning for stability and emotional honor. Lifestyle tendencies include emotional rejuvenation through mentoring, teaching traditional arts, studying ancestry, practicing rituals, or engaging in leadership roles that require creativity blended with discipline. Emotional peace grows when she invests her energy into building emotional structures that others can lean on. Projects, families, or creative legacies grounded in respect and emotional continuity. Challenges tied to this placement include emotional burdens or delays in romantic and creative fulfillment. She may experience emotional loneliness or periods where her creativity feels blocked, requiring emotional perseverance to continue building her vision patiently. Emotional maturity develops as she embraces the long arc of her emotional work, understanding that Saturn delays, but ultimately solidifies what is emotionally meaningful. Ultimately, Saturn in Maga blesses Annabelle with emotional strength to build noble legacies of creativity, love, and mentorship, patiently crafting emotional monuments that stand the test of time and honoring her soul's deeper mission of upholding dignity, loyalty, and emotional tradition across generations. Rahu in sixth house, Hasta. Rahu placed in Annabelle's sixth house brings intense focus, emotional ingenuity, and unconventional ambition into her daily routines, service-oriented work, health matters, and ability to overcome challenges. As the significator influencing her 11th house of gains, social groups, and ambitions, Rahu here ties her emotional drive for success and recognition to how well she navigates daily obstacles, manages crises, and asserts herself in competitive or service-driven environments. Rahu in Hasta Nakshatra channels her emotional and intellectual sharpness into practical mastery. Hasta's symbol of the hand suggests that Annabelle's emotional instincts revolve around skillful handling, being emotionally fulfilled when she can shape, manage, and control her environment and tasks with dexterity. Emotionally, there is a deep urge to craft her way through life's challenges. Whether through clever negotiation, tactical service, emotional adaptability, or tangible work that requires attention to fine emotional and technical details. Drawing from the planets in Nakshatra insights, Rahu in Hasta highlights an emotional pattern of becoming deeply entangled with solving practical problems, perfecting techniques, and emotionally asserting her independence through excellence in skill-based fields. There is a karmic drive to rise above mundane routines, to not just serve, but to master, gaining emotional satisfaction when she feels she has emotional and practical control over her work, body, or environment. There is an emotional magnetism about her ability to identify weaknesses in people, systems, or strategies, and the emotional ingenuity to correct or exploit them. Emotional rejuvenation for Annabelle often comes through improving something, editing, healing, refining, whether it is work processes, health routines, or emotional relationships. Lifestyle tendencies include a strong attraction to therapeutic practices, crafts, medicine, counseling, emotional coaching, or precision-based careers. She may also be drawn to social causes where emotional healing or service is needed, but always with a hidden ambition for emotional mastery and personal distinction through her skills. Challenges tied to this placement involve emotional hyper-perfectionism, becoming overly critical, or feeling emotionally restless when perfection is not achievable. Emotional maturity develops when Annabelle channels her sharpness toward constructive healing and service, learning to accept gradual progress instead of immediate, perfect results. Ultimately, Rahu in Hasta blesses Annabelle with the emotional brilliance to master her daily world through skill, intuition, and practicality, turning emotional restlessness into creative healing action, and transforming service into a subtle yet powerful path for emotional growth, fulfillment, and influence. Sun in 11th house, Purva Bhadrapada. Sun placed in Annabelle's 11th house connects her emotional identity, leadership instincts, and pursuit of self-expression with social groups, networks, collective goals, and long-term ambitions. As the lord of her 5th house of creativity, romance, and personal recognition, the Sun's presence here weaves her emotional fulfillment directly into how she gains acknowledgement, prestige, and emotional validation through collective achievements, friendships, and contributions to larger visions. Sun in Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra brings a profound emotional depth, intensity, and ethical seriousness into her social and aspirational life. Purva Bhadrapada's symbolism of the front legs of the funeral cot implies that Annabelle's emotional journey through friendships, groups, and ambitions often carries an underlying emotional gravity, a sense that her involvement in social structures must serve a larger, deeper, and even spiritual or transformative purpose, rather than mere popularity or material gain. Drawing from the planets in Nakshatra insights, Sun in Purva Bhadrapada suggests that Annabelle emotionally craves to be part of movements, networks, or causes that elevate human consciousness, challenge existing structures, or offer emotional redemption and societal reform. Her emotional drive is not for superficial social climbing, but to lead and inspire communities toward deeper transformation, ethics, and truth. There is also an emotional tendency toward duality in friendships, periods of deep emotional loyalty followed by emotional disillusionment if her ideals are compromised. She may attract emotionally intense, philosophical, or unconventional friendships and networks where radical or ethical conversations are common. Her emotional identity strengthens when her friendships and collective goals align with her vision of moral upliftment, spiritual evolution, or humanitarian reform. Lifestyle tendencies connected to this placement include participating emotionally in reformist groups, humanitarian organizations, or social collectives tied to education, ethics, spirituality, or progressive reform. She may also feel emotionally fulfilled in leadership roles, where she can guide the emotional and ethical direction of a community. Emotional challenges can include emotional frustration with hypocrisy, emotional withdrawal from groups that no longer align with her ideals, or emotional struggle with balancing personal creative recognition against the collective's needs. Emotional maturity deepens when Annabelle recognizes that her true social power comes from authentically embodying her ideals, not forcing them onto others, and when she embraces the reality that transformation of groups happens gradually. Ultimately, Sun in Purvabhadrapada blesses Annabelle with the emotional nobility to lead collective dreams toward higher truths, to hold a light in emotionally dark or transitional spaces, and to derive her emotional pride not from fleeting applause, but from her unwavering commitment to authenticity, higher vision, and emotional evolution in the world around her. Mercury in 12th house, Uttarabhadrapada. Mercury placed in Annabelle's 12th house connects her intellectual energy, communication skills, and emotional thought processes to hidden realms, subconscious patterns, spiritual introspection, and distant or isolated environments. As the lord of her 3rd house of communication and 6th house of service, Mercury's placement here suggests that her emotional and mental growth occurs through retreat, emotional healing, hidden efforts, and service that often remains invisible or unacknowledged. Mercury in Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra brings an emotional depth, quiet strength, and a mystical wise tone to her thinking, learning, and emotional speech patterns. Uttara Bhadrapada's symbolism of the back legs of a funeral cot suggests an emotional journey where intellectual pursuits and emotional understanding are not surface level, but involve emotional endurance, transformation, and deep emotional reflection on life's transient nature. Drawing from the planets in Nakshatra insights, Mercury in Uttara Bhadrapada points to emotional gifts such as profound emotional intelligence, the ability to intuitively grasp hidden emotional and psychological truths, and the skill to communicate with subtlety, empathy, and deep emotional wisdom. Her emotional mind naturally drifts towards spiritual topics, metaphysical exploration, psychological counseling, and emotional healing arts. There is also an emotional pull toward hidden learning, interests like ancient wisdom, mythology, occult sciences, poetry, or subconscious emotional patterns. Her emotional curiosity is not easily satisfied with superficial facts. She is drawn to emotional and intellectual layers beneath appearances, seeking meaning in emotional and spiritual mysteries. Lifestyle tendencies include emotional rejuvenation through solitude, journaling, spiritual studies, silent retreats, emotional counseling, or research into human psychology and emotional healing techniques. Her emotional mind operates best when she is allowed periods of emotional isolation and intellectual introspection, free from the noise of daily distractions. Challenges tied to this placement include emotional overthinking and isolation, difficulty articulating deeply felt emotional insights to others who may not immediately understand her depth, or emotional escapism into fantasy worlds if practical grounding is lacking. Emotional maturity for Annabelle develops when she embraces the need for both emotional solitude and mindful, clear communication, learning how to gently bring her vast inner emotional wisdom into practical service for others. Ultimately, Mercury in Uttara Bhadrapada blesses Annabelle with the rare emotional and intellectual gift of being a silent emotional healer, a compassionate communicator of hidden truths, and a guide who can help others navigate the deeper, often unspoken emotional landscapes of the soul. Venus in 12th house, Uttara Bhadrapada. Venus placed in Annabelle's 12th house connects her emotional desires, creative expression, relational instincts, and aesthetic sensitivities to the hidden, spiritual, and introspective dimensions of life. As the lord of her 2nd house of family values and material security and her 7th house of partnerships, Venus here suggests that her emotional fulfillment in love, beauty, and emotional security will often be tied to unseen realms, sacrifice, emotional letting go, and spiritualized forms of relationship and creativity. Venus in Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra infuses her emotional and relational world with a deep emotional devotion, patience, and a silent longing for transcendental love and emotional beauty that surpasses the ordinary. Uttara Bhadrapada's symbolism of the back legs of the funeral cot, implies that Annabelle's emotional journey through love and creativity is not superficial. It is about emotional endurance, inner grace, emotional purification, and building quiet, lasting emotional legacies. Drawing from the planets in Nakshatra insights, Venus in Uttara Bhadrapada points to an emotional pattern where she may appear reserved or emotionally self-contained in love and creative expressions, but internally experiences profound emotional sensitivity and loyalty. She seeks emotional bonds that feel timeless, spiritual, and deeply trustworthy, not loud, flashy connections, but those rooted in emotional patience, depth, and quiet endurance. There is an emotional affinity towards sacrificial love, spiritual relationships, or serving emotionally in partnerships without immediate recognition. Her emotional satisfaction often blooms in the background, through emotional support, behind-the-scenes creative work, artistic devotion, or spiritual partnerships, where unconditional emotional giving becomes the foundation. Lifestyle tendencies include emotional rejuvenation through artistic solitude, private retreats focused on creative or spiritual growth, working on art or beauty in hidden ways, or emotional healing through music, poetry, and deeply aesthetic emotional environments. She may also find emotional comfort in connecting with emotionally vulnerable populations or engaging in humanitarian or spiritual services. Emotional challenges tied to this placement involve emotional idealism that may lead to unreciprocated emotional sacrifices, emotional loneliness when her depth is not matched, or emotional escapism into fantasy love scenarios. Emotional maturity for Annabelle grows as she learns to set compassionate emotional boundaries, ensuring her emotional giving does not drain her, but nourishes her soul's deeper purpose. Ultimately, Venus in Uttara Bhadrapada blesses Annabelle with a profound emotional grace, the ability to love deeply, quietly, and unconditionally, to create beauty that serves as a spiritual offering, and to weave emotional and creative legacies that endure quietly but powerfully across emotional and spiritual dimensions. Moon in 12th house. Purvabhat moon placed in Annabelle's 12th house ties her emotional body, subconscious mind, and sensory receptivity to the hidden, spiritual, and transformative layers of existence. As the lord of her 4th house of inner peace, emotional security, and home, the moon here suggests that her emotional fulfillment, sense of belonging, and inner grounding are deeply connected to spiritual exploration, emotional isolation, and transcending worldly attachments. Moon in Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra brings emotional intensity, moral seriousness, and an instinctive yearning for emotional transformation into her private, hidden emotional landscape. Purva Bhadrapada's symbolism, the front legs of the funeral cot, suggests that Annabelle's emotional nature carries the gravity of profound internal endings and renewals, seeking emotional truth that lies beyond superficial emotional comforts. Drawing from the planets in Nakshatra insights, Moon in Purva Bhadrapada points to an emotional journey where Annabelle experiences profound emotional struggles within herself, often hidden from the outer world. Her emotional tides may be deep, mysterious, and filled with existential questioning, leading her toward emotional maturity through spiritual surrender, emotional detachment from illusions, and inner purification. There is a karmic emotional pull toward emotional self-sacrifice for higher causes, emotional detachment from fleeting emotional needs, and an urge to emotionally redeem or purify the self. She may feel emotionally drawn to mystical studies, spiritual healing, or working silently in emotionally intense environments, assisting others through unseen emotional support. Lifestyle tendencies include emotional rejuvenation through meditation, dream work, silent retreats, emotional introspection, or serving in emotionally demanding roles such as counseling, spiritual healing, or compassionate caregiving behind the scenes. Solitude is not loneliness for her. It is emotional regeneration, a necessary space to connect with her deeper emotional currents and restore emotional balance. Emotional challenges involve hidden emotional grief, subconscious fears, or emotional isolation, stemming from difficulty sharing her profound inner emotional experiences with others who may not easily understand her emotional depth. Emotional maturity unfolds as she learns to accept her emotional uniqueness, finding emotional companions or inner frameworks that honor her need for depth, healing, and emotional transcendence. Ultimately, Moon in Purva Bhadrapada blesses Annabelle with the emotional capacity to hold great emotional depth silently, to heal herself and others through emotional endurance and compassion, and to carry emotional wisdom gained through profound inner transformations, offering emotional light and hope in the unseen realms where others often fear to tread. Ketu in 12th house, Bhadrapada. Ketu placed in Annabelle's 12th house deeply aligns her emotional detachment, spiritual instincts, and hidden karmic work with the domains of isolation, surrender, subconscious realms, and spiritual liberation. As the Lord influencing her 8th house of transformation, occult knowledge, and emotional depth, Ketu here intensifies the emotional need to transcend material attachments, navigate hidden emotional layers, and walk a path of silent spiritual refinement. Ketu in Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra imbues her emotional journey with profound patience, spiritual endurance, and an instinctive understanding of emotional sacrifice and quiet dissolution. Uttara Bhadrapada's symbolism of the back legs of the funeral cot reflects a soul that has been through deep emotional closures before and now seeks to emotionally stabilize itself through quiet, steady inner spiritual work rather than external emotional drama. Drawing from the planets-in-Nakshatra insights, Ketu in Uttara Bhadrapada signifies that Annabelle's emotional fulfillment does not come from worldly emotional attachments, recognition, or intense emotional experiences, but from profound internal emotional peace, spiritual solitude, and unseen acts of emotional healing. There is an emotional karmic memory of lifetimes spent in emotional devotion, spiritual service, and silent mastery. And in this life, she naturally gravitates toward emotional simplicity, quiet dignity, and inner spiritual wealth. Emotionally, she may find herself detached from typical emotional pursuits, preferring emotional solitude, silent study, spiritual practices, or anonymous emotional service over the usual emotional attachments to relationships, possessions, or recognition. Her emotional instincts lean toward dissolving egoic emotional needs, focusing instead on emotional surrender, humility, and serving higher spiritual currents. Lifestyle tendencies include emotional rejuvenation through meditation, prayer, emotional minimalism, emotional healing retreats, or silent work in hospitals, monasteries, spiritual centers, or charitable organizations. There may be emotional satisfaction in emotional invisibility, doing the emotional work without seeking applause, knowing that the emotional impact ripples unseen into the wider emotional and spiritual fabric. Emotional challenges tied to this placement include emotional loneliness, feeling misunderstood emotionally by more materially oriented individuals, or emotional confusion during periods of spiritual awakening when old emotional anchors no longer satisfy. Emotional maturity for Annabelle evolves through embracing these emotional dissolutions as necessary spiritual purifications, allowing emotional emptiness to become a sacred emotional fullness rooted in divine connection. Ultimately, Ketu in Uttara Bhadrapada blesses Annabelle with the rare emotional gift of quiet spiritual mastery, the ability to heal, serve, and transform emotionally from behind the veils, cultivating emotional purity, wisdom, and peace that transcends worldly measures, and completing emotional karmas through silent endurance, emotional forgiveness, and unseen but potent emotional devotion to the eternal.